Hello, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, madam.
Sir, actually HOD madam busy with graduation day, sir.
Okay.
Sir, please continue with your presentation, sir.
Yeah, for that, if you stop presenting, I can continue.
Yeah, sir. Yeah, sir.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, please let me know if you have any AV trouble. Assuming that everything goes fine and starting, right?
Yes, sir. It is visible, sir.
Dr. Sai Kishore Jangiti, I'm working as an assistant professor in BITS Pilani, Hyderabad. Today, with a request by Shali madam, I'm presenting this a short lecture on reinforcement learning. So we'll discuss it in this following way. First, we'll try to highlight the difference between supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement learning, where the machine learning can be brought types of learning called supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement. And then we'll try to understand the relation between intelligent agents and reinforcement learning. Markov decision important model without which we cannot implement reinforcement learning. And Q-learning is a famous type of reinforcement learning which we'll see today. To implement reinforcement learning or Q-learning, OpenGym is a package, Python package, available for free. The students can download OpenGym and utilize it for simulating reinforcement learning machine learning models. And we'll also discuss some applications of reinforcement learning as following. Machine learning can be broadly categorized into three things: unsupervised learning, supervised learning, and reinforcement learning. The first two are famous, and you might have also discussed this unsupervised learning called clustering, and supervised learning called classification and regression in data mining and machine learning subjects. Whereas when it comes to reinforcement learning, it is rare to discuss about this because the first two, unsupervised and supervised, are data driven, right? So these are applied on data, whereas reinforcement learning will be starting from scratch when there is no data, right? Agent will be exploring the environment newly, and it will be observing the data from the scratch. Right. When there is no data, we can apply reinforcement learning. And in order to apply unsupervised or supervised learning, we need some data. Why do we call it as unsupervised learning? Consider a kid is given with certain objects. Say, every home there will be certain playing things with the kid. And the kid can group those things. Say, for example, the following objects are there with the kid. Right. So now The following objects can be categorized into several groups. So dividing the objects into groups is known as clustering. And while dividing the objects into groups, say a kid is dividing these objects into a group, none of us will be training them, right? Say we are not going to train that kid, but we'll just observe how he is making, and we'll just observe what is the outcome of the process. Like, so there the kid might have his intuition or logic, like he can separate things, he can make the circular things into one group and polygons into another group, or he can make like small things into one group and big things into another group. So these objects can be divided into several groups using several strategies, and those strategies to divide these objects into groups is known as clustering techniques. So here we have a diagram with 3 clusters, which is divided using a famous algorithm called k-means algorithm, which follows distance to separate the objects into clusters. Say, for example, we have a centroid here in the center of this cluster, and center of this cluster, and center of this cluster, for example, right? So these points are grouped into those clusters which are near to them, right? So relatively, so this point is in blue color because relatively it is near to this centroid than the other 2 centroids. So this has been grouped into this cluster, like, right? So here, if you observe, all these points are data, which are divided into clusters using some unsupervised learning techniques, say called k-means algorithm. Same way for classification also, right? So these things are data points, and mostly the classification techniques will be seen as a binary classification technique, where the data will be labeled into 2 types of data. One is positive and negative samples, and the classifier, the task of the classifier is to learn those data points and to construct a separating line or curve between those regions. Okay, so constructing a boundary between those regions is the task carried out by the classification algorithm, right? So by once the border is constructed, right? So based on that, it will be divided whether the data point is a positive or negative, right? So how the COVID test is also carried out is by using a classification algorithm called RT-PCR. So when it comes to regression, we'll be observing the trend of the data and try to find or forecast what is the value of the numerical model after certain time.